Well, hi, fish lovers. So Chewy is supposed to be here, Lunatic Fringe, and he has not arrived yet. So I'm solo until he shows up. He- we uh, we had a conversation yesterday about um, a topic of discussion and the Italian Cichlid Club, which he is heavily involved in. And he had a bunch of questions to ask and um, preparatory stuff. So I don't know. Anyway, he's not here yet, so it's just you and I, and we'll hang out and talk until he shows up or doesn't. I don't know what's gonna happen. So we have an hour to kill, and we'll either kill it with or without Lunatic Fringe. So yeah. Um, so stuff that's going on around here. Okay, so um, yesterday, day before yesterday, um, somebody sent us 4 boxes of cichlid caves, cichlid breeding caves. I thought it was Chewy, but as it turns out, it came from Chewy, as in Chewy, the pet supply. But we have no idea who sent it. None. So, so we're in a situation where we have to try and track that person down and say thank you because I have no idea who sent it. It's just kind of an anonymous box of caves, which is amazing. But I sure wish people would like send a note or something so I know who sent it and who I can send a tax receipt to. In other news, we finally found someone to run a satellite rescue down in Miami, which is spectacular. That means all of those people we have not been able to serve because we were not able to get there can now be served. I think I scared the hell out of him because I keep explaining to him how this is how this actually works, and like you don't know what's going to happen until the phone rings. And let's see, I think there was a ding in. No, it wasn't. Chewy's still hiding out somewhere. Anyhow, so hopefully uh, he'll get more comfortable with it as things go on because you just don't know what's going to happen until that phone rings. You think that what's on the other end is somebody who's got 4 guppies in a 5 gallon, but turns out to be somebody who's got 400 saltwater fish in 250 gallons, and you have to go figure out how to deal with it. So um, it'll be interesting to see how he deals with it. But anyway, we're really, really, really glad to have him. I've talked to him a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, and been really, impressed with his desire and willingness to get involved with fish. And uh, he's got some space, and he's a he's a gentleman who has kept a lot of fish, and so has some good knowledge about what it's like in the hobby. Now that it's business related, that's a different thing altogether. Um, but anyway, we're really glad. Kenny has got his pools set up now, so he can take in some of the bigger fish. We've got a big rescue for 50 to 100 koi, not this week, but the following week. A woman who's got a koi garden in her backyard, but she has been diagnosed with cancer, and now she's going through all the cancer treatments, and she's not going to be able to take care of them. And they're one of her biggest worries because she just knows she's not going to be able to do what she would like to be able to do with them. So we're going to go run to Orlando next week and pull all the koi out of there. Apparently, there's some 3-footers, which we seem to end up with a lot these days. So there's that. I've got like 6 or 7 rescues I could be going on if I could afford to go get them, but I can't. So they're just sitting there waiting for me to come up with something. But it seems like all the calls we get these days are down. They're either down towards Tampa or over towards Orlando, which ends up being a 2.5 to 3 hour drive every freaking time. And it's difficult. We just don't have some stuff worked out yet. Um, Hi, Steph. How are you? I'm having trouble seeing the comments because I'm a little farther away from my phone than I probably should be. But so if I miss them, I'm sorry. I apologize. Let's see other stuff that's going on. So Steph sent us uh, a financial donation last week, and we used it to go get a bunch of PVC, 2-inch PVC. That stuff's stupid freaking expensive, but I managed to find a guy in Lake City, which is about an hour north of us, who had a whole bunch of it that he had pulled out of a well system, and so he sold that to us relatively cheap. And it was an hour and a half drive, but so what? I mean, the amount you save on buying actual PVC is incredible. So yes, I got that. We're building. The first thing I'm building is a system where instead of having to put a hose in each one of the pools every day to make sure that they have fresh water, I could just turn the hose on, and all 3 of the pools will get water at the same time, which will save me a lot of hassle. And it will also give me the opportunity to keep warm water flowing into the pools over the winter as a secondary backup to my fire heaters, as a secondary backup to my compost heater. So they're staying warm this year one way or another. Yes, it is enough to have for future use too. So the first project is this one. The second project is to run the piping from the compost heaters, and then there's probably 30 feet, maybe 50 feet of pipe left after that. Now it's used pipe, so I actually have to cut it in different sections and get couplers and whatnot to make sure that it's all put together right. But it doesn't matter. It's I mean, I got pieces that were 20 feet long, which, as you well, I don't know if you know or not, but they're like $75 a single pipe if you go to the hardware store. And I got a bundle big enough to actually take up half of my trailer, just right in there. So yeah, perfectly happy about it. Saw somebody come in. Who did I see come in? Hey, Liquid Zoo, how are you? So yeah, I'm super excited about it. I've got to go get some couplings and stuff. They're still, I'm still got to spend some money, but it's stuff that it's made my life 1,000 times easier, and it's going to make sure that the fish stay warm this year, because I was trying to figure out how to get. I was going to have to take apart the fire heaters to hook up the compost heaters. So I was going to have to switch them back and forth, which is it's a process. I mean, every time you take it apart, it's a half an hour job. And the only reason I would have had to take it apart is if the compost heater wasn't heating enough at any given time. So I'd have had to switch it back over to the fire heaters, which is just no fun having to do. And so now I don't have to do that, because now I can hook up both of them at the same time. And the only thing I'll have to change is which pump is running. So yes. Hey, Shauna, how are you? So yeah, so like I said, this stream is supposed to be chewy. So apparently it's not. I don't know what happened to him. He's the one he called yesterday and said, "Hey, I really need to get this stream up. Can you do this?" I'm sure, of course, yes, absolutely. And now he's no-showed on me. I hope he's okay, actually, because it's chewy. Yes, less time cutting firewood and tending fires. Absolutely. I've been putting in, a couple hours cutting wood every couple of days, and then putting in at night, sitting out there from about 8 o'clock until 2, 3 o'clock tending fires. I mean, you're not doing it the whole time, but you got to go in and out. I think Chewy has just arrived, so let's find out. Hey, Chewy, there's the late guy.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir. Can you hear me, yes, sir?
I had to do a reboot.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't get in, so I had to reboot.
Right.
I am very, very sorry for how today has gone so far, but
doesn't hurt my feelings, man. I'm fine. I can talk. Right. I don't know if you met me or not, but my mouth can just run. I'll find stuff to talk about.
Yes, and I appreciate you taking over to start the program for me.
No worries. No worries. None at all. Like I said, I'll just sit here and make fun of you a little bit for being late.
Yeah, okay. Yes, okay. We like burning the candle at both ends nowadays. So we have a very very interesting topic for today, Mike, which basically has been a worry for the state of Florida's residents for since I can actually remember, because back in around 1973, 74, Tropical Fish Hobbyist put out a magazine at that time, actually saying about one of the first invasive species that caused real issues. But this happened during a hurricane. So it's not really on the people, but it's really on the no thought of thinking about the biosecurity of Florida.
Yep.
And I'm talking about not a cichlid, but the walking catfish. And
Yeah.
this happened back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I turned to my boss, who was uh, the original president of the Calgary Aquarium Society, and he said, "This will not be the last.
Oh yeah.
This is just the beginning."
Well, and I mean, it was happening prior to that too. It just didn't get any coverage at the time because people didn't understand how problematic it could be.
Right.
There have been invasives in Florida since the dawn of humanity, but some of those invasives have become pretty common to our waterways, or became common to our waterways before we even realized it was going to be problematic, right?
Right. But this one drew a lot of attention
Right.
because the state was throwing poisons at them and poisoning
Yeah.
waterways, and
Yeah.
then the catfish would just get up and walk out and leave, right?
Yeah.
And so, like up here in Canada, that fish can be kept anywhere
Right.
because it's not a threat to our actual ecosystem. But to your ecosystem, that fish has caused a lot of damage and still does.
Absolute monstrosity. Yes, and they're all over the place. You can, if you have a below ground pond for more than a couple of years, you can pretty much guarantee to have at least one walking catfish in there, and usually, several.
And let's face the facts here. It's not just fish that are invasive to Florida, Mike. It's also
Oh, yeah,
various different other types of animals and plants as well,
absolutely, absolutely. Of course,
right? Like I remember me talking about my favorite lovebird, and you went, and then I said, "Well, it's green and all of that," and he goes, "And you went, no, no, we have those," and I'm going, "Well, if you've got those, you can send me a few pair because that bird is endangered and it's only kept in the London Zoo, right?"
right.
But you have infestations of birds, you've got infestations of reptiles, you've got infestation.
Of
Infest-
course, everything lives here. It's the perfect environment for everything.
yes,
So so everything thrives. Well, with the exception of like buffalo, but
yeah, yeah. It's like you know, it's a mixture of practically every possibility of various different invasive species with no biosecurity. And
very
I
little,
don't
very little.
understand why the state is not more involved in trying to cut down on the fact.
It's weird, right? Well, so the state's involvement in it tends to be afterthought, right? So something comes in, it's invasive as hell, it does all sorts of craziness, and then all of a sudden they marshal a whole bunch of forces to figure out how to uh, to get rid of it and fail inevitably. But they have very little in place to stop stuff before it happens. That's what I always consider to be really bizarre about this state, is that we kind of knee-jerk reaction after stuff has come in, as opposed to getting on our horse and getting stuff done before it happens.
Part of the problem, I think, is due to the fact that a lot of the thought was about how some of these fish farms operated with just open ponds.
Yeah. Oh,
No
they still do. They still do.
building.
They're all just like that. They're all exactly like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So sure, a hurricane comes along and everything in those ponds basically gets spread throughout the whole waterways.
Yeah. Well, okay. So Florida has this. It's very similar to Texas in the sense that um, there is this big air quotes around the word freedom. And so when it comes to things like, well, any kind of industry, it doesn't matter what kind of industry it is, Floridians are very, very skeptical of allowing government to influence in it in any way, shape, or form, and that comes to invasive animals that come in. It comes to invasive plants that come in. You know, the government is always just constantly going, no, 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 we can't do that. Can't get involved in that because the people will revolt and shoot us. So, so industry gets left alone, regardless of how dangerous that industry is to our other biggest industry, which is tourism, right? You know,
Right.
if bass fishermen want to come here from wherever they come from up north, Michigan or wherever, and they want to come to fish for natural Florida wildlife, a lot of the times it's not there, or it's definitely becoming becoming to a point where less and less of it is there, because now they come down and they go bass fishing, and what they actually go home with is a big Mayan cichlid and 3 Oscars.
Well,
So
the thing is let's determine the word bass. Most of the bass that inhabit your waterway actually comes from South America.
if they, correct. I
And
mean, we still have some of the Florida bass here, but you're correct. A lot of them come from South America and have been imported at some point. Hi, June.
yes. So when it comes to that, and the reason why they put that fish in was like there were a few reasons. Oh, it's great for our fishermen. So
Yep.
a lot of your introductions are due to the commercial fishing industry rather than, let's say, the hobby industry.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Certainly from the fisherman industry. I mean, there a lot of the fish that are here are simply because somebody decided to stock a pond with fish that they wanted to be able to catch out of that pond, and
Right.
invite other people to come catch that fish out of that pond. And then of course a hurricane comes along, or a tornado, or whatever, a flood, and now those fish are everywhere. So you have a lot of that. Now that's where um, the fish like the bass and the trout and the things that are game fish came from, but the aquarium fish came from the aquariums. So
Right.
you have, there's this mixture, and they're competing for space that the natural wildlife is supposed to be, and the natural wildlife is going, oh, we can't live here anymore.
Well,
So
you don't have to be big to be invasive,
of course not. Of course not.
right? Like,
We were talking about that jewel cichlid last night, and they're not big, but man, are they mean.
and you don't even have to be that big if you really think about it.
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah, we have.
Pathogens, pathogens are generally all in itself an
That's true.
introduced invasive species.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. When you think about those, the mollusks that we had, the what are they? The tiger mollusks, I think they are, or jaguar. I don't know. Anyway, they're cat named. Anyway, those oysters that have just invaded the hell out of Florida. Those things came in on plants. They came in. They're damn near microscopic, and then all of a sudden they're everywhere.
Well, look at any virus or
Yep.
or any bacteria or like pathogens. Like our waterways are not naturally have ick in them, but due to people have let go fish
Yeah,
that
I wonder where
that
it came from originally. I wonder if that's a. I mean, I would be intrigued to find out what where that particular pathogen came from. Was it, was it naturally here all the time, or did it come in from, somewhere deep in a South American jungle, or did it come from the Amazon, or where did it come from?
and and when you're dealing with uh, microscopic, shall we say, animals or life forms, you're dealing with variants. You're
Yeah. Oh,
actually
yeah.
dealing
Sure.
with an animal that can mutate a lot quicker than any other species on the
Sure.
planet.
Of course. Yeah.
So you're dealing with that factor as well.
Yep.
Now, let's get to the fact of cichlids. Now, what they said about the bass was, we're putting this fish in for the sporting community,
Right.
but we're actually hoping for it to eat all of the other smaller cichlids
Right.
to try and eradicate that problem. But are they not going to eat uh, native fish that are native,
Of course they are.
that are natural to that system? You know,
Yep.
once you've made that introduction, it's very, very hard to eradicate a species of fish. Up here in Canada, we've poisoned waterways due to the fact of invasive species.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, and that's in the
And it doesn't work. The worst part about it is that it doesn't freaking work. Once a fish is in, it's in, man. You get a breeding pair of anything and give it 10 years, and you're never getting rid of it. There's no getting rid of it. As long as the environment can support that life form, it's staying.
unless some other fish or predator natural to that environment looks after it.
If
But
you're
in
lucky, but I mean,
a lot of cases in Florida, they're making a new introduction to get rid of the actual introductions that they've done before.
of course, and then that thing becomes a problem. I mean, it's the whole use another biological entity to get rid of a problem biological entity never works. It never works. I mean, like I said, once it's in, or you're going to compound the problem by adding something else that is equally as destructive in a different way.
Right.
So
Now,
really, the only solution is don't let it in.
exactly. But the thing is your state becomes proactive after the fact.
Always,
Whereas
always.
up here in Canada, oh no, this fish is banned.
Yeah.
Now we were talking about another fish, okay, that is not a cichlid in our talk yesterday, and I want to bring that one up, and that's the snakehead. You've got two different species of snakehead that are invasive to the United States. One is in Florida, and the other one is up north in Virginia on the East Coast there.
Yeah.
That's the northern snakehead, which would be very, very dangerous to our waterways.
Right.
And then you've got another type of snakehead called the bullseye snakehead, which was introduced to the Florida waterways. And I do believe that it was actually the food, like the people that want to have that fish around for food.
It's
But then
possible. I mean, just like the carp was that
caught
way.
that fish right in their own backyard.
Hmm.
And that's the bullseye snakehead.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't survive up in Virginia, and it definitely would not survive in Canadian waters. But what has happened with the Chana family or the snakehead family is that it got broad brushed by the whole northern hemisphere
Yeah.
of these monster fishes which only a few of them actually can cause real damage. When you consider that some of the snakeheads only reach like about 8 inches, they're not going to cause so much of a calamity than a 3 foot snakehead would.
I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that because I think the smaller ones are just as detrimental. They just destroy smaller smaller populations of fish that then eventually kills off the bigger populations of fish. So it's all a chain, right?
Right, right. It's in the chain, but the thing is I'm talking climate wise. Okay,
Oh, because they're not going to survive up there.
like they're not going to survive in Canada.
Yeah,
Fish from India and Africa do not live in our waters,
right,
or else we'd have like zebra danios all over the
right,
place.
sure, yeah.
Okay, so most of your dwarf snakeheads from India live and swim with zebra danios.
Yeah. Well, see, okay,
Like
so
they're a mollusk eater, like the
this is
dwarves are
the
mollusk eaters.
this is where the problem comes in with legislating what fish is and what fish isn't, right? So, recently, the U.S. passed a bill, I guess last year, that all of the fish that are allowed in via, or they're allowed to be imported, were suddenly off the list, and everybody freaked out because what happened was is that it used to be that list put fish on the list selectively and said this fish is not allowed in, this fish is not allowed in, this fish is, that one isn't, so on and so forth. And they basically flipped it and said nothing is allowed in. We will start adding fish to it to allow in, so that it's easier to stop fish that shouldn't be coming in from coming in. And so from my point of view, I understand it, and it doesn't bother me so much that law got flipped that way. But for importers and exporters, they went mad, and I get it. But legislating fish or invasive species in general is a hard thing to do, because in one sense you're taking away the freedom of fish keepers who want to have specific species. On the other hand, you're trying to protect the natural environment. And so what brush, back to what you said, what brush is too broad? How do you choose each hair on that brush? How do you decide that this fish is and that fish isn't, and this fish is safe and that fish isn't? And I mean, you have to do some sort of, you really have to have a lot of science involved, right? So up where you are, you should, every time a fish is going to be banned or not banned, should be not done by just some random policymaker, but should be made by a core group of 10 scientists who all sit around and say, okay, that fish is not going to cause damage to our system, because if it's here, it's going to die off in December. But that's never how it works, right? It's always some policymaker. It's always some guy who got elected to some government agency and really has no freaking idea whether or not those animals are going to actually cause damage or not.
So, on somewhat of a side of this, okay, there is what we call the banned invasives, but then there are the fish that are not generally considered invasive.
Right.
Okay, like fear of piranhas and fear of snakeheads. I get. Okay, like they could cause major damage to the human community. Okay,
Right.
because they've got the teeth to do so. Okay, but these are fish that generally would not live up in your particular area of Florida, but in the hotbed of southern Florida,
Right. Sure.
where a lot of the actual fish farms are. Am I not correct on
Yeah,
that?
oh yeah, you're 100% correct. I mean, we're about where we are right now is about 50 miles north of where all the craziness occurs. And the farther south you go, the more species there are that are thriving.
So generally, there's the
Hi,
biosecurity,
Renee.
the lack of biosecurity on behalf of the fish farms, and there's a lack of biosecurity of the factor involved in the fishing community. But there's also another product of our world that you cannot control, and that is climate change.
Oh yeah.
And I know for a fact that Texas cichlids have actually been migrating northeast.
Yep.
Okay, they're migrating into Louisiana. They're migrating into Florida, and
Yep.
I've heard stories of them going into Georgia. So you're not the only area of the world that has that problem.
Of course not. No, we might. Texas is as bad as we are. So you know,
There's a
uh,
place that's worse.
there's a place that's worse.
Oh, way worse.
Well, I'm sure but I don't know anything about what goes on over in Europe. So
In the Mediterranean, they like it still baffles me to some point. You build a canal between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean.
okay.
It's known as the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
Well, when they built it, there was only a small section of the Mediterranean where the fish of the Red Sea would go into. The rest of it remained too cold due to the glaciers and the water runoff and the natural heat of that area.
You're right.
But as gases like the gases that are known as the greenhouse effect have been escaping into our air. And I'm not just talking about the fossil fuels that are burned, I'm talking about uh, the permafrost of the northern hemisphere of Russia and Canada
Yeah.
affecting that because methane is escaping
Right.
into the oxygen atmosphere and therefore causing that kind of a problem as well.
Sure.
So you've got fish from the Red Sea now inhabiting most of the Mediterranean,
Right.
which is devastating to the natural population of those fish because they're outcompeting the native species of that area.
Right. Hey, Mike B. How are you, brother? Yeah. No. Absolutely. I mean, like my understanding of invasives outside of the U.S. is minimal because it's not something I study. But obviously, it has to be happening everywhere. I mean, we've got
Oh, Australia is probably worse than Florida, or along the same
right.
parallel
Yeah.
as Florida, due to the fact of uh, uh, thoughts of putting in fish for basically the same industries.
Yeah.
The fishing industry
Yeah.
is generally where a lot of it comes from.
It does certainly the fishing industry. Well, and that again that goes back to sports fishing, right? There a lot of that occurs from uh, folks who want a specific sport fish to be able to catch, and that does certainly occur. The aquarium side of it, I think they run fairly parallel. I think the fish that you hear about that get introduced via sport fishing. Um, Tend to make it to the news more prevalently because they're usually a bigger fish, they're usually a faster fish, they're usually more aggressive fish, and so you hear about them more frequently. You don't really hear about the estuaries that have been overcome by stupid little guppies that destroy habitats for things like our little pygmy sunfish, right? You figure you just don't hear about them because people don't really talk about them, but it happens all the time. Where there's a lake that I used to go fish in all the time back years ago, and you could catch all sorts of interesting native fish out of it, darters and who knows what. What's in there now are the mosquito mollies that we have been dumping for decades in Florida on purpose to keep the mosquito populations down, and very little else. Right. So we decided that we wanted to stop mosquitoes from biting us. So we put a whole bunch of mosquito mollies in the ponds, and those mosquito mollies are ridiculously detrimental to the native populations of fish. So it's one of those ladybug scenarios, or what are the other ones? The love bugs that we introduced, right?
Right.
For purpose of stopping one thing, and yet here they are completely demolishing another thing. And
Well, the thing about uh, that introduction is that it actually happened up here in Canada. I don't know if you've ever. Well, have you ever heard of Banff National Park?
yeah, I've heard of it, never seen it.
Okay. Well, there's a place called the Banff Hot Springs
Yeah,
where technically Canada's only tropical fish, endemic tropical fish, went extinct long before I was born. And it went extinct due to two species were added to try to eradicate that year's mosquito problem.
right.
So, what happened? It outcompeted the natural species,
Yeah,
and it was the start of the floodgates being open in the Banff National Park, the Banff Hot Springs. But nobody can go in there to fish them out. They're actually the only area of the world where invasive species are protected by the
right,
national park.
right. Well, I wouldn't say that because they're protected here too. Like, yeah, I am not allowed to fish in a national park. I cannot go in a national park and pull fish out. I can't even leave with a piece of wood from a state park here. Right. So I can go just up the river where the little green line disappears from it being a state park, and I can fish for whatever I want, but I can't actually fish in a state park.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We get to fish actually for native species in our national
Um,
parks.
yeah, you're allowed to fish for stuff that you're keeping in the park. Like, so if I wanted to go fish, catch a bass, and cook it over a fire while I was camping there, I could get away with it. But if I
Oh,
were to
okay.
go in, go fishing, pull a bunch of fish out, put them in a bucket, and try and leave the park, the rangers would stop me and make me put
Oh,
them
I
back,
see.
even with a
Okay.
fishing license. Yeah.
But so would the same theory be also applicable for the invasive species?
Yep. Can't catch anything out of a state park.
But if you are there in that state park and you wanted to eat that species, would that be
Then
considered?
I'd be fine. Yeah,
Okay. So therefore, you could eat pleco.
I could. I wouldn't, but I
Yes.
could.
You could eat uh, clown knife fish.
Could. I wouldn't, but I could.
Yeah. And you could basically eat uh, the basses.
But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. You can eat anything you want as long as you have a taste for it, I guess. But
Right.
they breed faster than we can eat them, and that's a fact. I mean, like
Right. Right.
um,
But the thought is that it could be done.
sure. And I mean, there are a lot of invasive species that the government will actually pay you to catch and kill, right? So the clown knife is one of those. There's if I catch them out, I take a photo of it and I send a picture to the right place with my name, address, and phone number. They'll send me a check for a couple of bucks a piece for each one of those fish.
And then, like, we have a problem where I want to talk about rivers for a bit here. Some rivers, certain species of fish don't live in until they're introduced.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And like, we have got two species in the Columbia River that were never a part of the ecosystem of that river, but have caused a great deal of damage.
Right.
One is the pike,
Right.
the
Oh yeah.
pike,
Well, pikes
the
are
northern pike,
yeah.
and the other is the walleye.
Right. Oh, the
They're not
walleye wasn't
native
up
to the
there?
Columbia River.
Okay.
So again, it's the fishing industry introducing a species that no thought has gone into,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
right? So I've seen this being dealt with fish. Okay, now up here in Canada, they pay. I think it's around $10 a head. Maybe it's gone up to $15 a head for fishermen to come up here and go ahead catch away. $15 a head.
Yeah.
You don't have to eat it. You could actually donate the fish to help feed the poor.
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
which I'm all for,
Yeah,
right?
they don't care what you do with them here. You can dig a hole and throw them in it if you want to.
Yeah,
And as long as you send a photo of the fish and they know you've caught them, they'll send you some money back. Which is, I mean, that's cool and all if you're an angler and that's the kind of thing you want to do. Um,
right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't really solve the problem. It cuts the problem down a little bit, but even if every single angler in the state of Florida decided all they were going to do all day long is catch freaking clown knives, they'd probably wipe them out for a short period of time. But next year they're going to be back.
Right, right. So it's an never-ending cycle. So the one fish that is close to your area that I know of that is a cichlid, Dr. Paul Azell, and you pinned his talk from the Italian Cichlid Association in the chat dealing with this topic, was introduced to a lake that actually shocked scientists because nobody expected them to live in the cooler water of Florida in that particular lake over
Hmm.
the period. But they thrive.
Of course.
They cause major issue
Hmm.
on the smaller fish.
Yep.
Okay, like your pygmy sunfish would be threatened by them.
They are completely,
Right.
absolutely.
So, you know, and I'm not going to put that on the fishing industry. That's a hobbyist.
That's a hobbyist. It is for sure. And
Yeah.
the problem with those fish, particularly, we're talking about the jewel cichlid, is that they have an affinity for eating other fish's eggs.
Yes.
So that's all they do is they run around all freaking day long picking off the eggs of all of our regular species, and so those species don't propagate like they're supposed to.
And
And
be and beating up the
yeah,
smaller fish
they are
too.
They don't just beat up the smaller fish; they beat up the bigger fish too. They pick the scales off of larger fish. They
Yeah.
school, and they will school and attack a larger fish and pick all the scales off of it until it dies. All the time.
Right.
They're brutal.
Yes. Yes. They're a nasty, aggressive cichlid.
Yeah.
Okay. So why is it in your waterway?
Somebody dumped it.
Why is not the tropical fish industry standing up and going, well, maybe we should actually try to help them eradicate them? Now, we discussed this topic on the phone because there is a difference of that fish in its own natural habitat, where it's like colored up because it wants to look like a piece of fruit from to protect itself from its predators in its own natural waterways. But now it's colored up to protect itself from the herons and the other types of animals
Right.
that.
It's not as pretty anymore because it needs to be able to blend into the Florida natural scape as opposed to being a pretty ornamental fish. But
Right. So I look at it from the aspect of Canada's invasive, one of Canada's first invasive, the guppy. Now, the guppy can cause a lot of damage too. Don't
Absolutely.
get me wrong, but the fear of guppies to Canada is very minute. It's the pathogens and the viruses that a fish can carry
Yeah.
is the issue. So all we need is a veterinarian to come along and give us a veterinarian certificate saying that the fish does not have that disease. It
Right.
can come in with ick, and the fish is let go, and it goes into the system, and hopefully, well, nowadays the wholesalers are responsible. Like
Not
this is
here.
one thing that I love about the decision about banning or making, not banning, but having legislation around people getting medications,
Yeah.
because our waterways are full of chemicals,
Right.
and
Right.
the pathogens are building up a resistance in
Right.
nature as well
Right.
as they would in an aquarium,
Absolutely.
right? So that is the rule on guppies or any other carp related species.
Mhm.
But I'm all for that. I don't mind that. It's
Yeah.
protecting our waterway. There was some thought to that.
Yeah.
Whereas there is no thought to the chemicals that hit the waterways of Florida.
That's true. That's true. We can have any, literally any medication you can imagine for fish, and
Right. And it's not only the medications, it's other chemicals as well. And
yeah,
it has caused a lot of issues in the waterways of Florida.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. So we're not just talking about fish here. We're talking about many different aspects of what your waterways have gone through over the years.
Yeah, and yeah, we know what. So we had a phosphate plant the year before last that was owned by a giant multinational conglomerate. It was getting too expensive to maintain, so they decided to sell it. And the government, for some unknown reason, allowed them to not only allowed them to sell it so that they didn't have to maintain it anymore, but they sold it and gave the next company that bought it a complete and utter pass on any ecological damage that it might do. And a year later, magically, the containment ponds that were holding all of that phosphate muck broke and dumped billions of tons of phosphate enriched sludge into our waterways.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
and so we have little groups like ourselves, like Florida Fish Rescue, and bigger groups that are specifically targeting ecological damage that are fighting constantly to do things, to keep like canibacterias down and to clear out waterways so that fish don't die and clear out waterways so that they can remain um, safe from ecological damage. But they're, like I said, they're knee-jerk reactions. These are things that, you have a giant phosphate plant that dumps billions of gallons of phosphate sludge into the water, and then some little freaking guys like me are out there trying to battle this to keep the water from turning into, you know, radioactive goo. And there's no way in hell we can keep up. And the government doesn't really put a lot of money towards making sure that it gets fixed, and they don't put any money towards making sure it doesn't happen.
Right.
So, it's left to us to go out there with a net and scoop canibacteria off the top of an estuary and hope that somehow our little scoop adds up to enough to keep it from blooming and taking over the entire water systems every year.
Well, don't get me started on plant and those types of things, because Okay, water lilies. You know water lilies, don't you?
Hmm. Of course.
Well, okay. It's not only fish people that do this.
Oh yeah,
It's plant people.
absolutely.
Okay, like outside of my house, there's some sort of weed that is like dangerous if you touch it. Even that's an invasive.
Right.
Because they had a big fence around this plant so that somebody from the government would come along and go, okay, let's eradicate this plant.
Yeah.
Okay, that is happening in Stanley Park. You know, like an IUCN special area. Okay, it used to have a beautiful lagoon. Okay, when I was a kid, I went to that lagoon and went, "Oh, this is cool."
Right.
But that was around the time that the introduction of these lilies were. Now there's no lagoon; it's
Right.
all lilies.
Yeah.
You can basically walk on the lilies across the lagoon and go, "Oh, I can walk on water."
Yeah, water lilies isn't our biggest problem here, but yes, I understand with the plants. We have quite a few invasive plants that have come from somebody dumping in an aquarium, and give it 10 years, and all of a sudden it's in every freaking waterway, choking everything else out.
Well, it's an Asian lily. Okay, this is what gets me is a lot of our species that are um, invasive in the plant world are from Asia, and if and basically the ones that are a threat are from like are from China, Japan, similar kind of climate.
Yeah, similar climates. Yeah.
Japan has got the same kind of climate as Vancouver.
Right.
So, no, we don't want, like, the White Cloud Mountain fish would be deadly in Vancouver area.
The white cloud minnows, you mean?
Yeah, White Cloud minnows.
Yeah.
They're a banned species in Canada.
Are they? You can't bring them in.
We cannot get them whatsoever.
Right.
And they're one of my favorite natives growing up as a child. I mean,
Right.
not natives, but cold water fish
Right.
growing up as a child. But we're getting our data from an area of Massachusetts where that fish is actually an invasive species.
Mhm.
Okay, so we go by, okay, whatever happens in the northern states, we don't want it in our water.
Right. 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 So that's where I get it. Well, I guess that's reasonable if you're seeing your southern neighbors experiencing a problem, then if you can cut it off at the beforehand. See, Florida doesn't do that at all. We don't cut anything off. You can have pretty much anything here, though there are a few exceptions. Like there's some freshwater rays we're not allowed to have. Um, a couple of exceptions here and there, but I don't know. It's weird, and the problem is that there's also no enforcement whatsoever, right? So. Um, we're not allowed to have this freshwater ray, but I could have 10 of them and nobody would ever, ever, ever show up to ask me about them.
Right, right.
You know,
And again, that is biosecurity.
yeah, we have none.
Right. Whereas we have some.
Yeah.
But have you ever thought of the issues if things that could fly become invasive?
Huh?
Like, let's say that flamingos can fly a long ways, right? Okay. So
Sure.
let's say that they find out about the San Francisco brine shrimp hatchery in San Francisco.
Yeah.
That wouldn't survive a spookbill or a flamingo invasion,
True.
right? Like it wouldn't survive. But the thing is that that was not built in an area where flamingos would naturally migrate.
Right.
But what if they do?
Well, then I guess if
You've
we have
got
another,
no control over things that fly.
I mean, we get invasive birds too, but I think I don't think there's, like we know when we get massive populations of things sometimes, like we get these green parrots that are South American that
Right,
aren't always here, but every couple of years or so, we'll get tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of them.
right. They
And
migrate.
yeah, they migrate and they come in and they eat the hell out of all of these. There's a couple of plants that they like specifically, or trees rather, that they like specifically that grow this weird orange fruit that we don't eat, but birds love it.
Right,
And they'll come in and they'll wipe out every freaking plant in Florida, every tree in Florida for about a year, and then they'll go away and we won't see them again for another 5 years. And then
right.
all of a sudden we'll see them again. But I think with birds, I mean, what the hell are you going to do about it? A bunch of
Yeah, you
Skynets.
can't really do much about birds and their migration because
June says invading
like
flamingos would
they're not
replace the
like
plastic
plane
ones.
traffic. You can't control them, right?
No, no, you
Mankind has got a lot of issues controlling air traffic as it is,
can't. Right,
let alone border birds, right?
right.
So, but back to the cichlids. You're only affected by maybe one species. Down in Miami, they've got tons of various different species, from Midas cichlids to Melanochromis auratus.
Absolutely.
But why?
Uh,
What is the big issue with why do you have that issue? Is this on the tropical fish sellers?
it is. Well, yeah, it's on a lot of people. It's on the farms, it's on the retailers, and it's on the consumers, right? It's a chain. So you have the farms who sell it to the retailers who sell it to the consumers, and the consumers who love their fish and don't know what the hell to do with
But
them. And
yet, how does this impact Florida fish rescue?
well,
This is
how it impacts us is that we're the only people really putting in the effort to try and keep them from going into the waterways. I mean, they're and I give all sorts of love to the unnamed rescues here in Florida. There are a lot of people who will take in fish. Now, they tend to want specific fish. They want expensive fish. They want big fish. They want the glam fish. But still, keeping those fish from somebody going, I love this red tail catfish. I don't want it to die. This guy will take it is fine. I don't care. Like I have no, there are a couple of other rescues out there that get all, what's the word I'm looking for? They get, I don't want to say greedy. Greedy is not the word, but they get that they don't want competition. I'm all
right,
for competition. Compete with me. That's less mouths that I have to feed. You know.
right,
Um, so I really give props to anybody who's willing to take in fish and keep those fish and house those fish and keep them safe and healthy.
right.
The problem is,
Regardless of the species.
yeah, the problem is there aren't enough of us. There really just aren't enough of us. There are. I can't find but a handful of people that are willing to take in any fish. And so when I have someone call me and say, I'm in Miami, I have 6 Oscars that have outgrown their tank, I don't know what to do with them. And I have to say to them, I'm sorry, I can't afford to drive down there right now. They say, okay, well, I'll figure it out. And I know that I'll figure it out means they're going to go dump them in a canal.
Right.
You know, um,
Regardless if an officer from your Florida Fish and Rescue sees them or not.
yeah. I mean, there's nobody there. Somebody once said, well, why doesn't Florida, keep these people from dumping their tanks? Well, that would require a Florida game officer to be standing at every single waterway 24/7 all the time.
Right.
And it's impossible. It's not going to happen. So the only way that is going to happen is to make it easy for people to find a place to take those fish that
Right.
isn't a waterway. That's the only way.
But
And
in your area of the world, I would say that the fish rescue business should be kind of supported by your government.
you would think,
Yeah,
um,
you would think that they would give you some sort of concession or some sort of uh, uh, regulations to help you.
You would think, but
Yeah.
I have been declined by at least 20 grants that we've applied for, because they don't, like I said, they have this knee-jerk reaction. Their reaction is to fix problems after they occur, as opposed to fix problems before they happen. And
Well,
I've had people in the grant process tell me, "Oh my God, what you do is freaking amazing. I can't wait to get this in front of my superiors." And then they call me back, 6 months later and go, "Well, they don't want to put any money that way." And you're like, "Come on, man, this is." Anyway, it's very frustrating. It is very frustrating to not have any financial support from the state level. And so, the next thing I have to do is go chase down the retailers and say, "Hey, look, you should really take some responsibility and throw a little money our way so that we can stand in that gap that you don't want to be in." Because I mean, retailers will take some fish back. They will. If you call PetSmart and you say, "I bought 20 fish from you 6 months ago. I would like to bring them back." PetSmart's, first off, they're going to ask you what fish they are,
yeah,
and they're going to say, and they're going to say, "Well, I'll take these 3 or that 10 back, but I can't take those other 4 back because I can't resell them." So now this fish owner, they're probably not going to take the 10 or the 8 in that fish that they can take, and not the 3 in that they can't take. They hit a brick wall that isn't a 100% solution, and so they're not going to do any of the solution. They're just going to, well, they figure they're going to have to go dump the other 3 fish, so they might as well go dump the other 8.
right.
Right?
And those fish usually are the fish that end up causing a big issue in your environment.
They are, and the only way to stop this, from happening, is to make it super, super easy for people to be able to get rid of fish if they have to. And I say if they have to, because it's almost never because they want to. Every once in a while, it's because they want to. I did have a guy I guess last year, who had like 18 tanks in a fish room, and he had just, he was just done, and he just didn't want to do it anymore. And I went and I got all of those tanks and all of those fish and brought them back to the rescue. But
Could you cover me? I need to leave the room, and so I will
Yeah,
be
go ahead.
back.
You're fine. You're fine. You're fine. I will talk to the chat. Yeah, pet stores will, June, that's exactly it. Their goal is to make money, and they have no other goal beyond that. So if somebody comes in and says, "I want 3 standard plecos, or I need a pleco for my fish tank," and the bristlenose pleco is $24, so I'm not spending that much, but I will give you $9 or $4 for that standard pleco. The fish store is like, "Fine, I'll make my $4." And so they sell them the standard pleco. When I go into fish stores and I create relationships with them, I constantly try and get them to move the standard plecos from the middle tanks down to the bottom tanks where you don't see them, so that you don't sell them. Because the less that are sold, the less that end up in the waterways. Because standard plecos, invariably, unless somebody accidentally kills them, are going to be a 12-inch fish within 3 years. And people don't know what to do with them, and you can't give them away. Nobody wants them. I watch people post standard plecos up on Facebook Marketplace, on Craigslist, on all sorts of places for free, and nobody wants them. Nobody wants them because they know they're going to be a 3-foot fish at some point, and so we end up with them. I think Victor has 24 of them in a pond right now. I've got at least 18 right now, because standard plecos come in. Same thing happens with goldfish. People buy feeder goldfish. They buy them to feed their Oscars or whatever. The Oscars don't eat them, and before you know it, they're an 8-inch fish. And nobody wants them. Nobody wants them. And then you've got the breeding, the accidental breeding. The accidental breeding is more dangerous than the intentional breeding. The breeders that breed a specific line to sell, usually those fish are going to end up sold. They're going to end up somewhere where the people who have them know what they were after, and that's acceptable. But all those people who have two convicts that they got from PetSmart, and all of a sudden the next month they have 5,000 convicts because convicts won't stop freaking breeding. All those convicts go into the ocean, and nobody wants them, or not into the ocean, but into the waterways because nobody wants them. We get the convicts. We get the convicts. We get the Texas cichlids. We get the goldfish. We get the plecos. We get all of these fish that are undesirable. But in order for them not to end up in the waterways, they've got to go somewhere. And I'm not going to kill them. I'm not the guy who's going to euthanize a bunch of fish simply because they're unwanted. Now, am I willing to allow predation to occur to feed other fish? Well, yeah, that's natural, and so that's certainly welcome. Hold the heck up! Only Oscars is only Oscars is June. She got the humor of a dude. She really thought she was a he. June's a tough guy, man. She's not taking any of your shit. That's why you think that's why you thought she was a man, because she just doesn't take any of your shit, Jason. The world is officially turned upside down. I don't know. I feel like it's been upside down for long enough that if it were to flip over, it might be right side up. Think about it. Put that in your head for a second. What's up, Terry? How you doing, brother?
I could not help but laugh when I heard you say convict.
Say what?
Like, when it comes to like overstocking and overbreeding, I could not laugh but to think about convicts. When you said it, I'm going, yeah. When fish are difficult to get rid of in the retail aspect, that's when fish are in trouble.
Yep, that's when fish end up.
Either they get fed or they get thrown in your waterways.
Exactly.
Okay,
and
so I understand that. Cichlids, like the big substrate spawners, like it's hard to control.
it's impossible to control unless you separate them, right? So anybody who has a cichlid tank knows that at some point they have a cichlid running around with a mouthful of brood. And now sometimes you can put those cichlids up on Facebook Marketplace, and lots of people will come to your house and take those fish away, and they'll go back into the hobby somewhere. But a lot of the times it doesn't work. I mean, that's how we got started as Florida Fish Rescue. Seriously, it was 7 years ago. There was somebody who had a tank with some fish posted up that he could not get rid of, and it was my wife, it was Heather, that talked me into going and getting them, because she had talked to the gentleman and he was going to throw them in a lake somewhere because his wife was remodeling the house and she wanted the fish gone, right? So when we get there, it's a 150-gallon tank with 4 Oscars and some parrots and a number of other things, but it was also 3 tanks full of Texas cichlid fry, hundreds of Texas cichlid fry. And it took us almost 3 years to get rid of all of those Texas cichlids.
Yes.
By finding people who wanted to adopt them, or by predation. Because I do, like I said, one of the things that I am accepting of around here is predation. Like, we right now have about 500 tilapia, and I put the catfish in the tilapia pool. And the catfish keep their numbers down. If it weren't for the catfish, I'd have 10,000 freaking tilapia.
Exactly.
So, I am, as far as how we handle our overstocks, I do certainly allow predation to become one of the situations that stops that. Now, we also have fish here that are not undesirable. Like most of the fish we have here, or a lot of the fish we have here, at least the fish we have in numbers, are undesirable, right? Like, we have tons of tilapia, we have tons of goldfish, we have tons of koi, though I wouldn't say they're undesirable. In the numbers we have them, they become undesirable, right?
Right. For the ornamental hobby.
Yeah.
For those that are starving, tilapia is the #1 aquaculture freshwater fish.
Absolutely. I mean, they're great for, if you want to have a garden running and you want, good good water to keep that garden running, sure, have a pool full of tilapia. I don't currently have a garden running, so what I have is a bunch of tilapia that are getting picked off by a bunch of catfish. So that all works out well and good. Keeps my costs down as far as feeding the catfish is concerned.
Right. I believe tilapia is in every part of the world for aquaponics except for Australia. They're banned in Australia
Oh, are they?
for
Yeah.
a good reason.
I mean,
Okay.
koi are great for aquaculture as well. Um, I think the only reason that koi are not as frequent in aquaculture is because they don't breed as fast. Tilapia breed. They're the rats of tilapia. Most of the cichlid varieties, especially when you're talking about South American cichlids like convicts, they're just the rats of the water, and they just breed so freaking fast that you never run out of them. And
Well,
so, you know,
could we identify the species of tilapia as being the Nile tilapia?
yeah,
There are
that's
a lot of tilapias that, uh, if you had big pools of, you'd make a fortune. Okay.
oh yeah,
Like the tilapia from Lake Victoria, which is heavily endangered, or the tilapia from Lake Tanganyika, which is probably one of the most beautiful tilapia out there. Like I understand that side of it. The ornamental tilapia uh, are not as widespread as the Nile tilapia, which basically are protected by hippos. Did you know that in the wild, the tilapia are the hippo's best friend?
I did not know that. An
They pick
interesting
on,
tidbit.
they pick on their skin and get rid of all of their parasites and get all of the nasty things off of their bodies, right?
Right, right.
And in protection for Nile crocodiles and other predators of Nile tilapia in their natural habitat, the hippo is their best buddy. Nobody messes with a hippo.
Yeah, yeah. Terry, yeah, the Texas cichlid is kind of a native in the sense that it has come here recently via streams and waterways and not so much via dumping. Um, though aquarium Texas cichlids and the the native Texas cichlids. I mean, if you want to throw it in native,
Migratory
they're
Texas.
they're different fish. They're not the same fish. The aquarium Texas cichlids are primarily the ones that you get lots of short body Texas cichlids. You get lots of they're not the same. They're not the same fish. They're a fish that is constantly bred into flower horns via that mixing pairing, but they're a different strain. Strain's not the right word. Well, you know what I mean. Different variety.
Population.
Yeah, different variety.
Different population.
Yeah,
Wild population versus ornamental introduced species.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
But
don't know, man. Like it's just crazy how many different species, and it's really been in the last 20 years. Like so, we've always had invasives. I mean, but the invasives that we used to have were primarily sports fish. They were different kinds of bass. They were different kinds of trout. They were different kinds of catfish that people had brought in specifically for food purposes, for game fishing, that sort of stuff. But in the last 20 years, that has changed dramatically, and uh, most of the new invasives coming into the state are from the aquarium hobby. They're from people dumping aquariums. And so we get, all sorts of weirdness. And I mean, next year, who knows what it's going to be. Right now, one of the biggest fish related invasives we have problems with are the clown knives because they thrive here and they are taking over all sorts of waterways and they are very, very aggressive. And they will wipe out full populations of all sorts of native fish. And
would not call them necessarily aggressive. I would just call them a natural predator.
okay, well, they're an aggressive natural predator.
Yes.
But they breed very quickly. They populate very quickly, and they're they definitely are really good at wiping out other fish breeds. So
Aggressive means jewel cichlid, aggressive
Yeah,
means
all right. Well,
Melanochroma serratus.
yeah,
Both are in your waterways, but the difference between the Melanochroma serratus and the jewel cichlid is the Melanochroma serratus is a mouth brooder that doesn't have thousands.
right.
That is the fish that is the fish where it's remained in its colors, okay, like yellow and black and all
Yeah,
of that sort of stuff. Like they never evolved the color pattern that the jewel cichlid did.
right.
They are still the same fish. But due to their aggression, I understand why the hobbyist goes, well, the pet shop's not going to take them because they're too aggressive.
Yeah, they're too aggressive, and they're not all
Yeah,
that pretty.
well, why did you sell it in the first place?
Exactly, exactly. Well, that's the thing. The consumer doesn't know, and this is one of the things that we are working so hard at is to try and find ways to educate the consumer through the retailer. And the retailer doesn't really want us there, right? But we have to find a way that before that retailer puts that fish in a bag and hands it to that little old lady who just wants a cute fish that she picked out, knows that that fish is not going to be cute in 3 years. And
Well, I'm not going to put that one on the retailer.
what's
I'm
that?
putting that one on the government.
Well, the government,
I'm
the
putting
government does
that.
not have interaction with the consumer, though. That's the thing. So
I know, but the thing is, like the government has got the beware of snakehead.
yeah, but they don't
They
have it
don't
in front
have
of
the
anybody.
beware of red-tailed catfish.
But they don't even have the beware of snakehead in front of anybody. If I
Yeah,
go outside right now and I go talk to 12 people and ask them to name 2 invasive species in Florida of fish, you know how many people are going to be able to answer even one? Almost zero, because
exactly.
there's no reach. There's no, the government says, yeah, okay, so the snakehead is dangerous. But who do they say it to? Well, they say it to those of us that are involved in trying to minimize the problem, but they don't say it to anybody else. They expect us to say it to everybody else, which is fine if we can afford to do it, but they're not helping us.
Right, and they are not proactive in the actual pet shop.
No, they're not. They
So,
don't. It's so weird.
basically, it's the free reign of that, and then they're trying to recover after the all the accidents have occurred.
Yeah, well,
But,
so
but
the problem is we live in the freedom state, and it's not a problem, but it's a problem. I live in the freedom state. The freedom state means that the government is terrified to get involved in anything because they're afraid that the crazy rednecks will pick up a gun and come shoot at them. I mean, seriously, that's how the state runs, right? So anytime that a law would be good for the system in general, they shy away from it because they know they're going to piss somebody off, and that somebody might be a gun-toting psycho.
yes,
Um, so like that they'll make the laws that aren't good for anybody. They're perfectly happy to make those because for some reason those same gun-toting psychos are perfectly happy to go along with those laws. But when it comes
right,
to anything that's going to help with the environment, with climate change, with improving the lives of people, they don't want anything to do with it because God forbid somebody gets mad. And so we have that problem with aquarium fish here in totally have it there. Like nobody is ever going to walk into a aquarium retailer and say, I'm sorry, you can't sell standard plecos anymore. They're not going to do it. They're never going to do it. So the only
no,
way,
of course not.
well,
But
they
yet,
should though. They should.
but yet, but yet, they go out and gather eggs, okay, and hatch them and sell them from the fish farms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Let nature look after it to a certain point, and then we'll come along and grab the eggs, and then we'll isolate them and make sure that they're treated so that we can sell them to the populations that need them, and basically cut off the throats of the natural countries that have those animals that need those animals to actually make an income for that country.
Right.
Does that make
Terry,
any
let
sense?
me answer a question for Terry. Terry, they did ban the snakehead from importing, so there is no new importing. But that doesn't mean that people aren't breeding them and selling them here, and there's nobody to stop that from happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you say 50 years ago, Terry, but it's still now. Nothing has changed. It's still the freaking Wild West. You can breed anything. You can breed
Yeah.
anything. We're breeding and then you get into the hybrids because people aren't just breeding specific fish that fit into a category of could be considered invasive because it's on a list. They're breeding all sorts of hybrids that don't fit onto any list yet, and those hybrids are becoming part of the aquarium trade. Like it's never ending, and so like I feel like we have done the one thing that is the only potential solution. I feel like there is zero other solution. You can't litigate against it. You're not going to stop people from bringing those fish in. You're not going to stop people from breeding those fish. You're not going to stop people from dumping those fish unless you give them an option.
Yes.
And
Like
and
what Terry doesn't understand is the availability of snakehead is not only in Florida, but in California as well.
yeah, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. I can go get a snakehead. Just like if I wanted to pop online right now and go get 3 snakeheads, it would be a nothing burger. And I could probably even get the
Whereas
really
I
pretty
can,
blue ones and who knows what else.
whereas I can't. I can only get that fish if I order it in frozen to eat.
Right, right,
Okay, which I would not mind.
right.
Like I hear that snakehead is delicious. I hear that discus is delicious. I hear that plecos are delicious.
Mm,
Have I ever eaten any of them? No.
right,
Instead, I get farmed tuna, farmed tilapia out of China mostly,
right, right.
right? So let's think about the actual place where these fish come from. Think of how much money uh, 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 a family could make even uh, freezing up peacock bass out of Brazil and sending that around.
Sure, sure.
You know, it's like we've brought up the factors of sport fishing, causing probably most of the root of the problem in the beginning. But
Absolutely. Yeah, in the beginning for sure.
yes, but then the fish farms got there, and basically we didn't hear anything until the walking catfish got out.
Yep.
Okay, and I'm like 12 or 13 years of age when that, well, no, it happened in about 73. So I'm like about 15 or 16 when it happened. And my boss is going, this is not the first, but it's the first time that it's really being seen, but it's not the end of it. You're
That
going
it's
to
that it,
find
yeah,
out how bad it gets because there's no biosecurity.
right. Well,
Like at
so
one time, Russian sturgeons were available for market in Canada
as a live fish,
as a live fish.
yeah.
Yes, yes. One time, at one time it was available, and my boss went. There's one fish on this list I'll never bring in because it's a threat to my country,
Yeah,
and it's fish.
yeah.
Anything else I'll bring in. He used to bring in snakeheads.
Sure.
Oh,
And listen, so I rail about this fairly frequently, but I honestly have nothing against the aquarium trade in any way, shape, or form. I think people should be allowed to breed whatever the hell they want to breed.
exactly.
But
But be
I think that
responsible and have the biosecurity of a fish that could
exactly,
cause danger in your area.
and just simply put some money towards it. Simply put some money towards it. All they have to do, if every freaking fish farm and every retailer threw 1% of their income towards any one of the rescues, I don't even care if it's me, any one of the rescues in Florida, we would be able to take in, maintain, and cover all of those fish and make it super easy for um, for people who need to dispose of their fish. We would give them because one of the biggest problems I have is distance, right? I get a phone call from Tampa, and they have 30 fish that they need to dispose of. And I say to them, well, I'm 3 hours away from you. You can drive here. And they go, no. And I go, well, I'm 3 hours away from you. I can drive to you, but I'm going to need you to pay for gas. And they go, how much is that going to cost? And I go, it's probably going to be about $150 because gas is expensive. And they go, no. And then I know they're going to go dump it in the river. Right. But if the state or if retailers see, like, the state should be doing it, but the state's not gonna, at least not at this point. And as much as I have talked to people and thrown out
Florida
grant
would go
proposals and
broke
whatnot.
by trying to do this.
Huh?
Florida as a state would go broke by trying to do it, to tell you the truth.
Not really, because I mean, honest to God, if we had, if rescues in general, if all rescues in Florida had $1 million a year to spread around, that would work just fine.
Well, yeah.
And $1 million to a state is nothing. I mean, it's piss in a bucket. It's nothing. But
it's the recycled dollar that gets me. Like the Pleco story really gets me. Oh, we can go out and get eggs and we'll hatch them ourselves. But meanwhile, you have starving people down in the Amazon River Basin.
Sure.
Eating. Now get a load of this: the endangered pink dolphin, or eating the scarlet macaw into basically a low number, which had to be restocked out of Costa Rica.
Right. Listen, I don't know how you change people's opinion. Like, I would love to convince people that jewel cichlids are amazingly tasty and everybody should go catch them and eat them. But how the hell do you do that? Because
jewels are not on a diet. It's
I know
the fish that I look at that are invasive are probably up to a foot long that the hobby can do something about. Past that, it takes public aquariums, it takes government.
Yeah, well, it really doesn't. Okay, so listen, when you talk about cat and dog rescues, most of their funding comes from personal grant money, right? It comes from so like PetSmart, Pet Supermarket, Petland. They all have grant availability for cat and dog rescues and sanctuaries, and
That's
so
that's basically North America wide.
Right. However, here for fish, none of that. When I go in and I apply for grants, I have to look for things that have nothing to do with what we do, but have something to do with what we do. Like, I apply for grants all the time that are things about ecology and repairing the waterways and repairing the ecological problems that we have, right?
Right.
But they look at my grant proposal and they go, well, this isn't doing any of the things that we have defined this grant to do, so no. But there aren't any grants out there for what we do. None. Nothing. So the way that the cat and dog rescues ended up having grants available for them is people walking into a cat and dog store, into a pet store, and saying, hey, what rescues do you support? What do you give money to the ASPCA, or do you give money to people that are rescuing these animals that you're selling? And so they put pressure on them, and they made them recognize that they have responsibility.
Correct.
Nobody is doing that for fish yet.
Oh, nobody ever has, because the way that society looks at fish, it's on my dinner table. It has no rights.
Or it's ornamental. It's not an animal.
But still does not have any rights.
Right.
Okay? Whereas your mammals and your birds get the highest rights out of
Right.
any pet.
Well, they're cute. Listen, people look at a cat or a kitten, and the kitten is sick, and they go, "Oh my God, that poor cute thing." If I show a video of a sick fish, people go, "Yep, that's a sick fish." They don't care.
And to me, okay, now get a load of this. Mike and I have talked about this, and I said, I'm tempted to buy a fish just to say, hey, Mike, look after this fish for me because it's from prize stock. How many prize stock animals would you see at Florida Fish Rescue?
Not that
How
many.
many? How many? But
Um,
meanwhile, if I went out and bought a trio of guppies that are from an IFGA judge and go, here, Mike, look after my fish. They are donated to the rescue. You can sell their young and keep the line going, but I want that to be a part of Florida Fish Rescue.
so,
And that is some of the ways that you can make money and plus selling.
except there's a stigma. Except there's
Yeah.
a stigma, and it's a stigma I'm trying desperately to figure out where I fit into this because, um, and it's a nasty stigma, man. I have taken some shit over it. Now I don't sell fish, but I have had people come into my DMs, come in to send me emails, just raving about me selling fish, and like trying to destroy my reputation over selling fish, which I don't do. Okay, so if I actually do it, what bugs are going to crawl out from under what rocks? Right? I mean, the insanity of it is that, um, being a rescue, Jill gives me 300 fish. Now, I take those fish in and I protect them and I make them stay healthy and I enjoy looking at them and I let other people look at them, but I don't sell them. If I start selling them, the the person who gave me the fish won't care. She's not going to freak out on me. She's going to go, okay, I understand. You need to be able to maintain your rescue. But the people that are going to rip on me, absolutely freaking rip on me, are the other sellers. They're gonna come in every freaking crevice and they're going to tear me limb from limb because what happens is that I get in a beautiful OB cichlid, peacock cichlid, and I'm not going to sell that fish that he's selling for $40. I'm going to sell it for $5
Right.
because it I didn't breed it and I didn't pay for it, and so for me it's
In other
reasonable to
words,
sell
you're
it.
asking for a $5 donation for the fish because you've fed it for a while.
Right, that's it.
Yeah.
Those sellers.
Let's not put the word sell. You are a rescue, which
So we
has
have done that. We have done that. We have allowed, and I've never put a price on it. That's the biggest thing is I've never put a price on it. And so I've said, yeah, okay, if you want to come, pick out a couple of fish. We ask that you leave a donation that is commensurate with what you're taking, but there's no
yeah,
prices.
right. And that is not selling. That is not guaranteeing the fish once they take it home. That is basically going, here, we need a donation for you to take this.
Right.
Okay? Now, that could apply to any fish,
Mm-hmm.
be it a guppy or a 4 foot long red-tailed catfish.
Absolutely. Now,
But the more major kind of stuff that the average aquarist that is going to be interested in is less than a foot long anyhow.
right. But see, I don't get a lot of those. Right. So
Right.
I don't get most of the fish I get are not desirable. They're not desirable. Most of the fish I get
Exactly.
are either too big or um, or they're just what people associate as a garbage fish, right? They're not particularly beautiful. They're not particularly spectacular. They're just
The
a fish.
jewel cichlid would be a prime example
The jewel cichlid.
out of the situation because, oh, hey, I caught these and now I don't want them, but I don't want to throw them back in the pond. Can you take them?
Yeah, well, if you caught it out of the wild, that thing's going back. I mean, as far as
Yeah,
I'm concerned,
well, the thing
it's
is there is interest. Now, this is the difference between families of fishes.
Yeah.
Now, there is interest in what we call uh, the feral populations of guppies,
Yeah.
because certain stocks have been added and they begin to show certain colorations that you might not find in the actual real wild guppy from Brazil and Venezuela, etc.
Right. They call them muck
But
guppies.
but we're talking about a 1 inch fish that basically can cause damage in an invasive situation, but is not ever thought of as an invasive species.
The
Right?
what is?
Did you hear me?
Yeah. The what is?
It's like a guppy is not thought of as an invasive species, but it is.
Yeah.
Same with
Well,
the
yeah. No,
mosquito.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The mutt guppy is all over the place, and it definitely is an invasive. We didn't have guppies of the kind that we have all over the place until somebody brought them in.
Right.
That's for certain.
But you could literally catch those and say, "Hey, they're from my tank. Do you want these at your pet shop?" And they probably take them,
Yeah. Well, maybe.
right?
Maybe.
Oh, I'm sure that happens
Yeah.
because it's the wild form of the guppy. The thing is that the variation caused by, shall we say, the birds and natural predators affected the jewel cichlid to make it an ugly species
Right.
of that particular jewel
Right.
cichlid, which makes them kind of unsellable, except for to that maybe that few that are interested in that population due to the fact of science.
Right. Well, I mean, like those Mayan cichlids, which are huge down here. I mean, we have tens of thousands of billions of freaking Mayan cichlids in the waterways. Nobody wants those things either. And they're a cool
Right.
fish, but
Yeah,
like
but they're too big for the average aquarist.
they're too big. They're not quite as colorful as you want them to be. Like, I mean, and one of the biggest problems with the invasives is that they morph. Once they're into the natural environments, they stop being the really pretty fish that everybody wants to keep, and they start becoming more natural. And so
Right.
their stripes fade, their hump gets smaller. All the things that make them desirable stops being so desirable.
Right,
And
because of the lack of the ornamental features of the fish
yeah,
and not of the evolution of the fish in, let's per se, the introduced environment that they were introduced to.
yeah, yeah. And then
And it was lack of control over the genetics of the fish for its natural look caused by the environment.
yeah, they crossbreed with all sorts of things, and they get less interesting.
Right.
So so
Yeah,
then
hybridization comes into the factor too.
mhm.
Like the cluster genetic pool of Florida is actually quite amazing.
It is.
And
It is.
is that natural hybridization? No, it's introduced hybridization.
Yeah, it is. And you never know what you're going to end up with. I mean, there's a page on Facebook that I visit pretty frequently, which is can you identify this fish? And it's an awful lot of fun because people will pull a fish out of a river in Florida or an estuary in Florida somewhere and go, "Can you identify this fish?" And about 7,000 people go, "Yeah, it's this, and this," and nobody actually knows what the hell it is because it's not a something. It's a
Right.
hybrid. It's a mixture of a Mayan and Oscar and a clown loach. I mean, like all sorts of
Yeah,
weird stuff.
you know, all you need is the people from Glowfish to get involved, and maybe we could see some more colors,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
Because it's basically, shall we say, kind of a genetic source that is controlled by nature,
yeah, yeah.
right?
And nature doesn't control it all that well.
Right.
Nature kind of lets it rip. So
Exactly. It's uh, a survival of the smartest.
Trailer
In,
Fish says, "What fish would not be considered invasive in, say, Florida if I had 100 mixed sexes of anything placed in, say, a lake?" Well, That's exactly right. 100 mixed sexes of anything placed in a lake is probably
Well,
going to end up
I
invasive. And
think of a few,
well,
but
yeah, the ones that are already here.
whether or not that they could hybridize in the amount of time that the water would be cool enough, it is possible for a trout to cross with its hybrid cousin, well, its cousin, like relative
Mhm.
through nature, the Arctic grayling.
I mean, we know that all sorts of things can hybridize. I mean,
Yeah,
just look at the hybrids we have in the aquarium hobby. We can hybridize all sorts of very strange creatures. And
yes,
in nature, so long as they're in the same lake at the same time and the temperatures are right, you're going to get all sorts of weird shit.
yes, as long as they're generally from the same family.
Yeah.
I'm yet to see bettas and cichlids crossed.
Well,
Okay,
yeah.
it takes the people from the glowfish,
Right.
to come in and
Genetically splice them
introduce,
on purpose.
yeah, and introduce those kind of genetics, and then therefore then you've got that genetic in Florida as well.
Hmm. Yep.
Luckily, you have not got the glow kind of issues that could happen.
We don't know. I mean, that's the thing, is that what is out there? Who knows? There, like I have gone, when I go pressure washing, sometimes I end up in like trailer parks. And so the trailer park will have this big pond in the middle of all the trailers, and we'll be washing, and I'll go stomp my way out and go look in the pools out there. And you see all sorts of things in the ponds, because the folks from the trailer park get old and they die, and so their aunt goes over and dumps the fish in the lake. So, is there a lake full of freaking glowfish somewhere? I'll bet there is. I'll bet there's
There could
probably
be.
10 of them.
There could be, but whether or not they'd be able to cross out with the species that are there, it would be hard to say.
I don't know. I mean, they're just barbs and tetras, right? So,
No, there's also, actually, believe it or not, there's also a pink angelfish that was done for a public aquarium only.
yeah,
So you don't know what else they have worked on,
I guess that's true. Yeah. I mean,
right?
I guess
So
there's
you don't
glow
know,
goldfish now, too, right?
right? But like it's not only in freshwater. You like get real with this one. It's like the lionfish. They're trying to teach you guys how to eat that instead of trying to teach you how to eat snakehead.
Right.
They're trying to teach people how to eat lionfish, right?
Right. Right.
And teach the moray eel, the local moray eel population, how to feed on them.
Right.
Because in their own natural habitat, the moray eel, those species love lionfish,
Right.
dinner time, right?
Right.
So they're trying to teach your moray eels
How to eat lionfish.
how to eat lionfish.
Right. And
Yeah.
hopefully that'll work. I feel like that's really interesting.
Well,
Terry, I can't give
I
you the link.
like that psychology because, hey,
Terry,
the
I can't give you the
moray
link
eel
because this
has
is
got that
actually
kind of
Chewy's. This is
digestive
actually Chewy's
system
stream,
to
sir.
handle, you know.
I'm sorry, I overtalked you. Go ahead.
They've got that kind of digestive system to handle it.
Yeah,
So,
no. So
sharks,
I am all for teaching the natural predators how to predate on certain things. Like dolphins learn how to predate on certain fish that are in the areas in which they live, and they learn all sorts of really intriguing, cool ways to get to fish that they don't do in other places. Like I don't know. There's an Australian dolphin that beach fishes that just doesn't do it anywhere else, and they all chase the fish up onto the beach, and then
uh,
they take turns running up onto the beach, basically beaching themselves.
it's also up in Norway. There's a population of dolphins that do there.
Right,
Orcas used to do it with salmon
right, right. I,
until
I,
the
I find that really interesting that
population.
that fish can learn how to predate on something that they don't somewhere else. And yeah, if we could teach moray eels how to eat lionfish, that would be incredible. I don't know how you teach a moray eel to eat lionfish, but I guess you just keep throwing them in a tank with one and cutting them open and letting them chomp. I don't know.
so we talked about how the factors of climate change has affected Florida through invasion and Italy.
Right.
But have we realized what it's doing to our own natural fishes that rely on cold,
Yeah. I mean,
that rely on glaciers and like the cold water species that come from the oceans that have to swim up our river systems to spawn. Meanwhile, we had a record of 110 days in parts of British Columbia and suffered the same kind of drought that China did that took all the press. That occurred across the northern hemisphere.
yeah,
It
you were
was
saying.
not just isolated. Now, now I'm a cold species. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't like hot. I detest anything above 80.
Don't never
Okay,
come here.
I don't want to come there. You send me up all the cold, all the snow. I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just don't send the hurricanes up our coast, please. Stop them down there where they're more natural. Because as, shall we say, climate change has happened, our weather patterns have drastically changed
Right.
around the world. And the farther north you are, the more you notice climate change.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Like,
listen, we're noticing it here. We've got swaths of land that are going to be underwater in 10 years. I mean, and people are not being smart enough to sell that property and get out from under it before it happens. Because I mean, we're going to lose hundreds of acres of freaking land simply from the water
only
rising.
happening
And it's
down,
happening.
it's happening up in the Arctic.
Yeah.
And Nunavut has to be moved because the permafrost has cut away so much that it's like the ocean waves have done their job on wearing away the land.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's not only down there,
No,
it's
of
up.
course not. It's all over. It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
We're not known to have a Nunavut is sinking.
Right.
Like there's a song by the Tragically Hip, New Orleans is sinking. Well, how long has that been going on? We've known about that for a long time.
Sure. Sure.
What
Well, New
if
Orleans is a bog.
the
The whole freaking state's a bog. So
what if the words were a Nunavut is sinking? This is a Canadian legend band that wrote a song about New Orleans is sinking because it had a history of it.
mhm,
And Nunavut has not got that kind of history.
right.
So you see the impact in my personal life. We have like Jasper, on the way to Jasper from Banff there's a place called known as Columbia Icefields. I have personally seen that glacier go from the highway and recede 2 miles up
Right.
in my 60 years of
Right. Right.
being on this planet.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's weird here. Like, so climate change is
Water is
affecting us.
fine, people.
It's affecting us in ways, kind of unexpected ways, because we have really high rising saltwater tides, but we have rivers and lakes that are going empty. Like
Right,
our fresh water is going away, but our salt water is increasing.
right.
And it's freaking weird because you would think it would, you'd think it would increase in both fresh and salt, but it does not appear to be that way.
No,
Fresh water.
of course not.
Well, why? Of course not. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get it.
Because we do not have the impact of restoring the water that we're taking off the glaciers.
We don't get water from glaciers here. We get water from springs.
Yeah, well, I sort of get why you have got that problem, but generally, most of North America, like the Great Lakes, are going to look pretty funny dried up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the lakes that are out in Arizona and New Mexico, those things are dropping by hundreds of feet yearly now. I mean,
Yeah,
they are going to be puddles in another couple of years,
right.
and they can't figure out what to do about getting water from there to California and keeping water within their own. I mean, that's a big clusterfuck right there. That one's
Right.
we haven't
Like
reached
there
that
is a
level of crazy yet, but
continental divide, okay? Like there's a continental divide, and it's basically right at the Alberta and BC border. Anything that flows east is minerals, heavy, like there's no real forests in the area. And so you're getting things like marble and limestone and all of those kind of minerals dissolving in the waters that are heading east.
right.
So it's all hard water, okay? Whereas in BC, ours is kind of like the swampy lands of Florida, but in a different way.
Mhm.
Our water does have black water,
Right, right.
okay? But it shows mostly blue because of the mineral content.
And the glacier ice, right?
But we have got thousands. Okay, like we all know that pine is deadly on certain species of
Hmm.
fish, but not so deadly on the fish of BC because they've been swimming around in pine needles forever,
Oh, right.
right? So they're used to it.
Hmm.
Okay, it's actually a natural kind of antibiotic plant for them.
Right.
Okay, is how the plant works, right? Like the botanical thought of it. So, like without water, there will be no trees.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
what kind of plants grow in the desert,
Yes. Not much.
right?
I don't know.
And
It's weird. I like you can see it happening, but you can't really. I mean, even the scientists aren't entirely sure where it's going and what's going to happen when it's all said and done. Like, we knew that the Lake Tahoe and the other lake in New Mexico were going to start to dry up, but the understanding of what was going to happen when it dried up, nobody really knew until it started drying up. You know,
mm,
and then there's no plan. There's no plan. It's just kind of a, oh well, look, this shit's happening, and I mean, it's gonna get worse and worse and worse. And in 10 years, where we are right now is going to seem like everything was just fine. And then 10 years after that, it's going to be even worse than that. And there's nobody is making any kinds of plans for real. They're just going, well, here it comes. We'll, when it happens, I guess we'll throw up
yeah,
a
well,
shanty.
we're all looking for a solution, and that is part of the conferences that went on in Egypt and like the big Brazilian election that luckily the right guy kind of won, and all of the politics of the world and all of that sort of stuff. Okay, I don't want to get into that part of it, except for on this note. Up here in Canada, we have got an interesting female marine biologist that has actually got government approval for rescue aquariums of cold water fish in the Arctic.
Really?
Yes. Her name is Melanie Knight.
We
And,
need that here.
like, not enough is really, really said about the biologists that actually come out and actually put themselves on the line on YouTube to try to teach people these kind of things.
Yep.
Like a lot of our fish fam, shall we say, are so tropical orientated they really do not give a lot of compassion to the animals of their own
Yeah. No, but a lot don't. Some do.
countries
Some,
of
some,
North
some very
America.
much do. But it's, I don't know. It's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag.
Yes,
You know.
yes. But the factor is through the hobby, the tropical fish uh, market. are more aware of like the CARES program for the fish,
Mhm.
and North American Native Fish Association that has to deal with these kind of issues. And they are not a part of, per se, the tropical fish hobby.
Right. Hey,
They were
Chewy.
not represented at all at the Triple Crown,
Right.
but
So
yet
listen,
there
we're gonna
were people that kept native fish at that event.
we're gonna wrap it up here in 4 minutes. We'll be on 2 hours in 4 minutes. So um,
Cool.
I'm gonna close it down. I got a bunch of stuff I got to go do too. I've got some fires I got to start, and I got some fish I got to uncover, and some feeding and stuff I got to do. So um, I
Right.
I really appreciated this conversation we've had. I always love talking to you, Chewy.
Well, it's a mutual kind of thing because we look at it through each other's eyes and try to learn about each other's predicaments.
Yep. And it's interesting because you're in Canada and I'm in Florida, and yet we do have some of the same. I mean, the invasive species are everywhere. It's not, like you're thousands of miles away from me up in a freezing tundra, and yet you still have the same situations, maybe slightly different, but the same general problems. And
Right. But
yeah,
it's now sort of like a desert that went through 110-degree temperatures of record temperatures, and I'm not used to that.
yeah, right. Well,
You
we're
know,
we're gonna have a lot of that. We're gonna have a lot of that over the next few years. There's gonna be a lot of shit we're all gonna see that we're not used to,
yeah.
unfortunately.
And it's not only going to be fish, it's going to be plant species, it's going to be mammals, it's going to be a whole bunch of various different species
It
that
it is.
scientists are saying will drop off the planet. So, it's like it's an ever-ending battle, Mike, and I think that we covered the topic quite well for the Italian Cichlid Association. And I want to thank you for having this discussion with me because I think that it was beneficial for both parties.
Absolutely a pleasure, Chewy. And
Yeah.
and June, we're working on it, man. As you can see, our network is actually a little bit stable today, and I'm sitting at like 2 bars of 5G, which means I can actually manage this stream without dropping out all over the place, which we have not been able to do until just recently. So we'll probably start doing it a little more frequently, at least when the network looks like it's going to try and be stable, which is why I can't really schedule something and do it at a regular scheduled time. But
But thank you for doing this for me. I was looking for a topic and basically it was right in front of me and I went, Mike, I have this idea and we discussed it prior
absolutely
to.
a pleasure. Just thrilled to do it. I love hanging out with you, Chewy, and we don't get to do it very often, so it's good stuff.
Especially alone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes on panel, but that always goes crazy because
Yeah.
we have a habit of getting on crazy panels. So
Right.
that's all.
Exactly. Exactly. Thanks, Mike. And thank you to the audience and from the Italian Cichlid Association. Thank you
Yeah,
for.
thanks everybody for hanging out. Thank you, Chewy, and we will see you soon. We'll run something. I don't know what it's going to be, but we will run something fairly soon. So, thank you, Chewy. Signing out. We'll see you guys all later.